Good afternoon. This is Avi Bernard in for Areva Martin. Here's what you might have missed today. Justice Department and FBI investigators have amassed fresh evidence pointing to possible obstruction by Donald Trump in the investigation into top secret documents found at his Mar-a-Lago home. The additional evidence comes as investigators have used emails and text messages from a former Trump aide to help understand key moments last year. The new details highlight the degree to which special counsel Jack Smith's investigation into the potential mishandling of hundreds of classified national security papers at Trump's Florida home and private club has come to focus on the obstruction elements of the case, whether Trump took or directed actions to impede government efforts to collect all the sensitive records. And Donald Trump departed from Florida on Monday for New York, where he is scheduled to be arraigned Tuesday in connection with an investigation that has centered on hush money payments to adult film star Stormy Daniels to conceal an alleged affair ahead of the 2016 election. Trump, the first sitting U.S. former president to be indicted, flew out of West Palm Beach on his jet around 12:45 p.m. Eastern. We're going to talk about those subjects and others with our contributors. We've got Douglas Flo from Washington University in St. Louis, and we've got LA Times columnist Gustavo Arellano joining us. We're going to be talking to those gentlemen when we come forward right here on KBLA Talk 1580. Happy Monday and welcome back to Areva Martin in Real Time. I'm Avi Bernard, filling in for Areva Martin today. And we are joined by our expert contributors, Dr. Douglas Flo, who is an associate professor at Washington University in St. Louis, and Gustavo Arellano, who is an LA Times columnist. Really appreciate you both for being here. And I want to jump into some of this indictment news. There's been so much happening today, over the weekend, and today there's an article in the Washington Post about the Justice Department and FBI investigators having amassed fresh evidence pointing to possible obstruction in the Mar-a-Lago probe. So this is not even relating to the indictment in New York. So how much trouble do you think Trump is in, Gustavo, just regardless of the New York situation? How much other stuff is coming down the pipe? And do you think the other stuff is more serious than the indictment he already has?
I mean, look, you have Mar-a-Lago, you have, I think, Georgia. Those are the three that have been getting the most attention. Remember, Trump allegedly called the Secretary of State, whoever's in charge of voting, and says, I need X amount of votes to be able to get me the victory. We know, I mean, people in New York know this Trump from the 1970s and 1980s. There's always going to be legal issues with him. But as my brother-in-law Bernie said, prison is for the poor, not the wealthy. I don't think we're ever going to see Trump in handcuffs as much as so many people want him to see. For him, this is part of the business. Last I checked, he was a billionaire. He hasn't declared bankruptcy in a while. He is going to be fine. Now, the only way we can make sure that his world is not fine is if he is denied the presidency in 2024. Everything else for him, it's just, it's an opportunity for him to make money. He's raised $7 million ever since this indictment was put out. So he is happy right now. He is absolutely happy. He wants more indictments.
Doug, what do you think about that? And I'm speaking, of course, about Dr. Douglas Flo. I beg your pardon. We were talking before the show. But
okay.
Flo, what do you think about what Gustavo said about Trump never going to experience what it's like to have handcuffs on? I mean, the indictment in New York alone has about 30 counts. We don't know what they are yet, but I feel like at some of those, at least one of them has to stick, and then that's just New York. And as Gustavo mentioned, there's Mar-a-Lago, there's Georgia, which are, at least on the outside looking in, they appear to be a lot more serious. So do you agree with Gustavo that Trump is never going to see the inside of his cell?
Yeah, I'm with Gustavo. I mean, we have in this country a tradition of not convicting and putting ex-presidents in prison. And I don't think that's going to change now. So it really remains to be seen whether or not this indictment will be a bad thing for him. And just as Gustavo said, there are a lot of ways in which he can and will, and we've seen him do it in the past, leverage this into something good. And he already has. It already has become something that has drawn a lot of his support and brought people out. And we've seen so many times that he's taken bad press to reinforce his supporters. He didn't win re-election. So this gives us some hope that he still does live in the real world and dealing with real consequences. But we've seen him so many different ways take bad things and turn them into something good. I mean, just recently, the rapper Tekashi 6ix9ine, the one who's notorious for returning witness against his friends back in 2019, he was recently assaulted very brutally and very unfortunately in Florida. But he took it and put it into one of his music videos, right, as a way to promote himself. And I think that Trump is going to do the same thing. He's going to turn this into a rallying cry. He's already pulled his supporters into the mix. And it's just, I think that's what is ultimately going to happen here. He's not going to end up doing a perp walk with something over his face and his hands handcuffed behind his back.
Well, you mentioned Tekashi 6ix9ine, and the rap game has changed. You are able to get assaulted and then put that in your music video. That would have been the end of your career back when I was growing up in the 90s and 80s. Wow.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, that line that you said, Gustavo, really got me. Prison is for the poor. That is true, and it just hurts because that has been the history of this country. But Doug, you mentioned the political ramifications. You said he's been able to rally his base around this. Do you think, Gustavo, that at least this indictment, and we can see as the indictments continue to roll in, but at least so far, do you think that this has been good politically for Trump?
This is not winning him any more voters. The base is angry. It's the base that's going to be showing up to his rallies. But, you know, people, I'm here down in Orange County, California. This is Trump Central, Huntington Beach, California, especially. There's only about 24 people showing up, even at that, at the pier. Whereas in the past, you'd get hundreds of people. Even there was a rally for Trump when he came down here in 2020. It was about, what was it, 1,000, 2,000 people in Newport Beach. It's the law of diminishing returns, at least in terms of what he can gain politically. Now, what he can gain financially, this is what it seems to me now. This is all these indictments are just a ploy for Trump to get more money. To get more money, he's always been about the bottom line for himself, one way or another. And if he's not going to be able to get electoral victories anymore, if he's not going to be able to create a political party the way he tried in 2020. Let's not forget. Yeah, he got J.D. Vance as a senator from Ohio, but almost everywhere else he suffered financial losses, or rather the political losses, and the Republican wave was a dribble. And so at this point, Trump's like, you know what? What have I always been good at? Getting money from dupes. So let's just get as much money from dupes as we possibly can.
Is that his sole purpose now, Dr. Flo, to try to get money from his supporters?
No, I mean, I think he probably does think that, and I completely agree with Gustavo. I think Trump does believe, though, that he could probably leverage this back into the presidency, right? I mean, and I think just as Gustavo said, that's probably not going to happen. He's probably not getting new supporters because of something like this. But I think he probably is thinking and hoping that what he's done in the past and that has worked, you know, we watched it happen for years. He kept leveraging things and turning very negative things into positives. And I think he thinks he can still do that. I think he thinks that maybe his loss of the last election was just a fluke, and that he can probably turn things around. You know, and that seems to me a little bit delusional. But who knows? I mean, who knows what we'll be saying in a year? I don't underestimate the first of all his political abilities, because, you know, again, we've seen him do some really stellar things, and no matter how much we might not have liked them, some of us. But I also don't underestimate the fact that there are a lot of people in the country who are angry with Joe Biden or angry with certain aspects of the politics enough to possibly give him a second look. Do I think the indictment might help him with that? No, but I do think he's in position. He's in the spotlight once again. He's in position to frame himself as a victim, and then you know, possibly be a contender again. I mean, and I don't think that's too far-fetched.
Yeah, it's remarkable how a man who has been given just millions upon millions of dollars from his father has been able to claim victimhood his whole life. But you mentioned something, Dr. Flo, that I want to go back on. You said that he thinks that his loss was a fluke. And I'm curious, you know, he's obviously been perpetuating the big lie for, you know, this entire time since the 2020 election. But do you think that he actually believes he lost, that he knows he lost?
Yeah, no, so that's a good point. And maybe the word fluke is not the right word, but just I think he thinks that it wasn't indicative of how people really feel about him, right? He thinks that it was, as you said, stolen from him. He thinks that it was some anomaly, that it doesn't represent where he is politically. So I could imagine him you know, possibly thinking, you know, this indictment is yet another one of the ways that I can make myself, you know, a part of, you know, a very strong contender in the race.
Yeah, he's trying to keep his relevancy any way he can. What about you, Gustavo? Do you think that Trump actually believes that he lost, or do you think he believes his own BS that the election was stolen from him?
It's everything stolen from him. He is the billionaire victim. The libs, the Dems, the Mexicans. Yeah, exactly. Like everyone is against him, and all of his followers. I mean, look, how can you gain more people when you have a rally in Waco, Texas, where your choir is a bunch of people who are indicted for storming the Capitol on January 6th? This is victimhood upon victimhood upon victimhood. Sadly, though, this country, the right especially, is just filled with a bunch of people who would rather whine than listen to what they used to say and believe in self-responsibility. The Republican Party under Trump has become the party of no self-responsibility. And there's a lot of Americans who feel that way. But thankfully, as the last two general elections have shown, the popular vote has gone with people who believe. And look, I was no fan of Hillary. I did vote for Biden. I was a bigger fan of Biden. But as long as Biden stays a course, and I say this on the show all the time, I think Joe Biden is not given a fair shake by anyone. I think he's actually done a lot of great things. He's not perfect, but as long as he stays a course and things don't get worse, there's, I think Biden will be able to beat Trump. I don't even know if Trump gets all the way to the general election.
Wow. Okay. Well, what do you think about that, Dr. Flo? Do you think Trump is the Republican nominee in 2024?
That's a really great question. It really I think it really depends on how these indictments shake out. I think at the moment, I don't really see, Ron DeSantis or anyone really emerging in a way that completely takes down his campaign. I feel like we're in the same kind of moment we were in before he was first elected, right? Where there's a danger of underestimating exactly how much support he has, which in the first election, we vastly underestimated. We were all sitting with our mouths agape, or a lot of us were, half the country, wondering how this could happen. And I really I don't know. I learned my lesson that night, and I wouldn't put anything past him. At the moment, I don't see Ron DeSantis taking this from him. Something would have to happen in the next few weeks. We'll have to see how this indictment plays out, and whether or not there, unbelievably, something actually shuts him up. But unless that happens, I really have a hard time imagining him not being the nominee. There are a lot of people who were upset with him and who maybe, were Republicans who were maybe happy he didn't win re-election. But if he's the nominee, most of those people, I imagine, are going to vote for him anyway. And if there's not a strong enough contender to knock him out of the box, a lot of those people are going to vote for him in the primaries. So I think he has a really good chance of being the nominee.
Well, I feel like, I want to know what you guys think about this. I feel like him being the nominee is probably the best case scenario for Joe Biden. I think it's you never know what's going to happen. As you said, Dr. Flo, we underestimated him once. I remember that night in 2016 being so extraordinarily depressed and in shock. And you just never know now. I didn't think America would go there. We went there. But now that he served that awful 4 years and then he lost in 2020, he's been dragging the party down ever since. Do you think that he would be the most favorable matchup for President Biden? Let's start with you, Gustavo.
No, absolutely, easily. It's weird because the Republican Party needs to take a political laxative and just get rid of Trump right now while they have the chance. The longer they let him continue on the charade, the more likely he'll win the nomination, the more likely Biden, again, this is if all goes according to kind of where we're at, which is not necessarily perfect, but not as horrific as people make it out to be, and he will just wipe him clean. On the other hand, if you get someone like DeSantis, or maybe even Nikki Haley, although probably not her, but someone else to be able to say, all right, I'm going to get Trumpism, but I'm going to be polite and I'm going to have policies that are not about victimhood and get sort of that, the wind behind his back, the way an Obama did, or a way even Trump did at the end, then they have a better chance of getting at Biden. But for right now, I still think it's Biden's election to lose. I mean, it's hard enough for incumbents to lose, but Biden has been more popular than people make him out to be.
Yeah, and I agree with what you said earlier, too, about him having a lot of success this term, and his success has been underrated. And to that last point, though, about incumbents having a hard time losing, if not for COVID-19, I don't know that Trump would have lost re-election. I mean, his mismanagement of that pandemic and just complete aloofness, how to deal with any of that, and just all of the gaffes he made, and it was just horrible. And I think if not for that disaster, he probably would have been reelected. But Dr. Flo, do you think that Trump is the best possible scenario for President Biden's reelection campaign?
I do not. Again, I agree with Gustavo. If someone could embody Trump's, his ideas, which seem to be very central to the Republican platform right now, but not be Trump, right? Like Ron DeSantis or Nikki Haley, as Gustavo mentioned. If someone who could be, like Trump, but not him, and challenge Biden, possibly someone younger, which I hate to say, we're a very ageist country. There's a lot of stuff that people are angry about with Biden, and a number of issues that they see him as being the cause of. I think Biden would be in real serious trouble if someone else runs, and I think Trump, to be perfectly honest, I'm not so convinced that Biden would beat Trump. I think that I'm afraid that Trump would have a lot of ammunition. He would have a lot of things in the past 4 years that he could point at and say, if I was president, this wouldn't have happened. I think that he would exploit some of Joe Biden's faults in ways that really could be a problem. I do agree that he might not be the best candidate for the Republicans to put forward, but I do worry that he might have a lot more power politically than we think he does.
So do you think that Biden would have a better chance of beating Trump or DeSantis?
That's a really good question. I would say I think he would have a better chance of beating Trump from that matchup. But then the question is, is there any possible way that Biden could, I don't know how much of this conversation has been happening in the news recently, but put someone else forward? Is that still a possibility? Again, just like Gustavo, I'm not completely against Biden. I think he's, he was a good choice, and I voted for him. But I don't know if I think that coming up to this next election, he's going to be the most powerful candidate we could put forward. And obviously, he's the incumbent president, so it's his choice whether or not he will run. But yeah, I'm kind of worried about either of those matchups that you mentioned.
Yeah, I think just with his State of the Union speech, it does seem as though he is going to run. He kept saying, finish the job, finish the job. Sounds a whole lot like a campaign slogan, like a election campaign slogan. But yeah, moving on to this indictment, I want to talk about this thing that Trump said about the judge. He has a habit of attacking people who are doing their job lawfully if he doesn't like it, or if he's the subject of it. So he, on his social media platform, Truth Social, he said that the judge, quote unquote, hates me. And then his lawyer, when appearing on ABC talking to George Stephanopoulos, says, no, I don't think the judge hates him. I have no reason to believe that. Yeah. Is Trump eventually going to finally get himself in trouble by doing this? And this is the first time he's been indicted. And so he's played these games before, but he's never had this level of stakes before. So Gustavo, is this a dangerous game he's playing, or is the judge just going to let it go?
Trump needs to start being like that XFL player from back in the day, just wear a jersey that says "He hate me," going all around, because everyone in Trump's world, if you're not with him, he hate you. And disturbingly, Trump has this pattern.
Gustavo.
I'm a boomer. What can I tell you? I know, and a football fan. So Trump has a very disturbing record of attacking Latino judges. The judge in this case is Colombian American. I remember a couple of years ago, there was another case, and I can't remember what it was, but it was a federal judge, Mexican American from Indiana. Mm-hmm. Well, look, Trump is going to hate any judge, but he keeps attacking.
Gurriel, I think it was Judge Gurriel.
Yeah, that's exactly who it was. So in this case, thankfully, because these judges, and they have not had any critiques, unlike some of the judges that Trump has appointed in his 4 years, they have no criticisms of being biased. So anyone could talk trash on a judge before the case. Once he's in court, that's going to be interesting. Once this arraignment happens, once he has to stand in front of a judge, that's when you don't mess with judges. Judges do not play around with anyone. If you mess with their courtroom, if you mess with their rules. So I think Trump is just playing his game on Truth Social, 1, 2 a.m. in the morning, firing off 50, all caps, misspelled crap. But once he's in the courtroom, he's going to be nice. Yes, Your Honor. No, Your Honor. All that stuff. And then just move on.
I like the impression.
I try. What can I tell you?
Okay. I wasn't expecting a Trump impression out of you, Gustavo. I will take it, though. And I wouldn't be mad if you wanted to do one either, Dr. Flo. But I wanted to just follow up about the same question. Is he playing too many games with the judge in this case?
I mean, I think he's always playing too many games. But again, and I think what Gustavo said was great. Like when he gets in the courtroom, that's going to be a really interesting thing for us to see him in such a controlled environment, right? His whole life, he's been just like a bull in a china shop, online, in person, in the presidency. And this will be a really interesting moment to see whether or not an actual authority figure who actually has the ability to make some pronouncement about his life, whether or not that will actually bring him to a point where, as Gustavo said, he's going to, find his humble center. I don't believe he will. I don't believe he will inside the courtroom. I don't think he will outside of the courtroom. And it will be really interesting to see what sort of consequences he faces. I mean, like I said, it seems as if for most of the time we've seen him in political life, as if he hasn't been dealing with real life consequences. And the election was a real life consequence. And I think he's gonna find pretty quickly that judges are not going to take the same, a judge won't take the same kind of treatment that other people have taken. And in this case, he's not the president. He's a former president, and he's a defendant in a case.
Yeah.
If you're just joining us, it's Avi Bernard filling in for Areva Martin on Areva Martin in Real Time. And we are joined by LA Times columnist Gustavo Arellano and Dr. Douglas Flo, who is a professor at Washington University in St. Louis. When we come forward, unfortunately, we have to talk about the other presumed top Republican GOP candidate, Ron DeSantis. Unfortunately, I know it's not something that any of us want to do, but unfortunately, he just keeps on doing things that we have to talk about and threatening the freedom of more people in his state. And so we're going to do that. In the second hour, we're going to be talking to another LA Times columnist, Erica Smith, about the Mark Ridley Thomas verdict. She has a very insightful article out about that verdict and what it means to Black Los Angeles. So we'll be talking about that in the second hour, as well as attacks on women's rights, women's reproductive rights that are happening across many red states. That's coming up in hour number 2 at 5 p.m. Pacific. But when we come forward, I'm back with our expert contributors about the latest headlines on KBLA Talk 1580.
Martin in real time when we come forward.
Aircraft issue. She was on her way to Michigan to promote her husband's Investing in America initiative. Her press secretary said everyone is safe and the plane has landed back on the ground in Denver. Meantime, former President Trump is back at his New York City residence on the eve of his indictment. He'll face charges tomorrow related to an alleged hush money deal to an adult film actress to conceal an affair. Trump is expected to take a mugshot and be fingerprinted, but will reportedly not be handcuffed or take the traditional perp walk for security reasons. And thousands of homes and businesses in California's Central Valley are under threat from snowmelt and the catastrophic flooding which could result.
We are into those longer daylight hours, which can trigger snowmelt at a much more rapid pace.
I'm Julius White on your home for 24/7 News, the Black Information Network, and BINnews.com.
Heading into La Crescenta on the 210 westbound, right after La Crescenta Avenue. Got a crash in the center lane. It is stopped coming away from the 2. Pasadena on the 210 eastbound at Sierra Madre Boulevard. Looks like we got a disabled vehicle trying to make its way over to the right shoulder. And once you're past that, 210 eastbound to the 605 North Connector. Had an earlier crash in the lanes. They are getting it to the right shoulder. Overall, it's going to be slow from the 134.
Hi, I'm Kyle at Blindster.com. At Blindster, we offer over 50 different custom window treatments, including faux wood blinds and shutters, all at prices less than retail. Plus, we'll send you free samples before you buy. Don't hire an expensive pro. Do it yourself and save big at Blindster.com.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
San Diego State's men's basketball team is on the doorstep of history in tonight's national championship game against UConn. San Diego State is trying to become the first number 5 seed to win the title and the first school to win the title in its first trip to the Final Four. UConn is a 7-point favorite. Raise your hand if you had San Diego State and UConn in your bracket playing for the title. If your hand is up, you're almost 1 in a million. Out of 20 million people who submitted a bracket when the tournament started, only 0.4% of those brackets had San Diego State and UConn battling tonight for the title. Tip-off at 6:20 on CBS. After the first weekend of the Major League Baseball season, the pitch clock is already making a difference. Games are 26 minutes shorter than they were a year ago. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, conversation, and opinions when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
KBLA Talk 1580, covering news and breaking news first.
Breaking news here. We've been covering this every day since the trial began. USA v. MRT. The verdicts are in. The jury has found LA City Councilman Mark Ridley Thomas guilty on a number of counts.
Keep it locked to KBLA Talk 1580 for news and analysis about the things that matter most to you. We're unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580, and we've got your flag. KBLA Talk 1580.
Hi, Maisha Cairo here, KBLA, live at Chase Bank on Crenshaw and Vernon for the In This Together tour with female business owners, a day of empowerment, community panels, and best of all, tips on building business from marketing to capital. Today, I was able to speak with Ola Wadibia, VP of Women on the Move. Hi, Ola. Tell me a bit about this initiative by JP Morgan Chase, founded in 2013.
Women on the Move is a center of excellence at JP Morgan Chase in our global DEI organization, where we really focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. What's really awesome about Chase's approach is that all of our centers of excellence, and there are 7 of them, focus on different demographic groups, is that we're really focusing on what's happening internally in the firm and also what's happening out in community. So really, Women on the Move is really focused on thinking about how do we help advance women professionally and personally.
I love it. So tell me about this beautifully updated banking branch here on Crenshaw.
That was really important. A part of our racial equity commitment was to build in place for Chase. So being able to revamp this beautiful space, to be able to welcome community members, today, anyone, nonprofit, organization, school can actually do events in our community center that we're sitting in here for free. Yes, people come inside, grab a coffee, use the Wi-Fi. It's free.
Yes, Maisha Cairo in the community for KBLA with JP Morgan Chase.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
The rent is too damn high. KBLA joins you in calling for affordable housing. The LA Tenants Union is a diverse, tenant-led movement fighting for the human right to housing for all. The LA Tenants Union demands safe, affordable housing and union rent control. They organize against landlord harassment, mass evictions, and displacement, and mobilize for the repeal of the Ellis Act and Costa-Hawkins Act. The LA Tenants Union is on a mission to strengthen tenants' political power through education, advocacy, and direct action. To get help with your eviction or other landlord-tenant issues, take action for justice, or become a member, visit latenantsunion.org. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
All right, welcome forward. I'm Avi Bernard, filling in for Areva Martin on Areva Martin in real time. We're joined by LA Times columnist Gustavo Arellano and Dr. Douglas Flo, who is a professor at Washington University in St. Louis. All right, gentlemen, there is legislation that would sharply curb press freedom in Florida. It's creating a rift between Governor DeSantis and the media that have helped propel his rise. The legislation was drafted at the urging of DeSantis and takes aim at several protections in state and federal law, including the decades-old Supreme Court precedent that makes it difficult for public figures to win libel lawsuits. So apparently DeSantis wanted this legislation drafted so he could attack the quote-unquote woke media, and his right-wing buddies in the media are now saying, hey, buddy, this is not good for us either. What's up with DeSantis? Is he really just this bad at seeing the full picture, at zooming out and seeing things from a wider lens? Is he so focused on attacking the woke mob, quote unquote, and making Florida the place where woke goes to die, that he's putting his own friends in the media in peril? What do you think, Gustavo?
As someone who has been threatened with multiple libel lawsuits in my career, from my previous job, not at the LA Times, but my previous job, and beat them back all, including someone who actually tried to do a libel lawsuit against my wife. True story.
Wow.
Libel lawsuit, yeah, no, true story. You folks can look it up. But one of the great things about this country, among many things, is the fact that the press and individuals can attack public figures with the truth. And this is the specific thing. When we say public figures, this is not what DeSantis is saying. DeSantis would love to make everyone a private individual. Private individuals have far more rights afforded to them when it comes to articles about them, especially the article or mistakes about them in the press, than public figures. Public figures are the ones who would try to sue you and then some. Here in California, we have something called the anti-SLAPP law. It's called the strategic lawsuit against public participation, basically ensuring that public figures cannot sue anyone for just a time, or if a public figure sues you for defamation, knowing that they're doing it just to shut you up, they have to pay for your not just for your lawsuit, but also they have to pay for their lawsuit as well. DeSantis and other people just want to erode that. But conservatives who are smart, and there are smart conservatives out there, they realize that what set this was a Supreme Court case, Sullivan versus New York Times, and it sets very specifically that for a libel lawsuit to be able to be winnable, you have to prove that the press or, the particular, press publication lied about you, knew about it, and did it with malice. Almost always mistakes happen, and that's what saves us from so many libel lawsuits. So DeSantis, he tries to brag, woke goes to die in Florida, but he's getting owned by his own stupidities again and again and again. We saw he tried to take away the rights of Disney from the Reedy Industrial District or wherever it is, basically the land around Disney World. Well, Disney did some last-minute things to own DeSantis. Same thing with this libel lawsuit. I mean, if he's smart at the end, he's going to pull it because his own people are going to be in trouble by being sued by liberals who don't like him. And I also disagree with liberals who try to sue conservatives just for the hell of it when it comes to libel.
Well, I'm glad you gave us a little bit of background on that law, because that seems to be exactly what Fox News did in the Dominion lawsuit. They seem to have lied about it, have known about it, and no retractions, no anything. And so I got to think that based on that, then they're not looking good in that lawsuit, especially with Rupert Murdoch coming out and saying, yeah, we actually did do that. But to your point, though, Gustavo, that is an important protection for members of the media. You're doing reporting, you're stating the facts to the best of your knowledge, and sometimes things are misinterpreted or misstated, and things that are printed or said that are not correct, but you have the ability to retract, and that's an important ability that the media needs to have.
And that's what Fox is citing, specifically Sullivan versus New York Times. And Judge Clarence Thomas, the Supreme Court, he has openly said maybe we need to weaken that. Like, this has been a conservative pipe dream. Now that dream is here, and now conservatives saying, wait a minute. Maybe those liberals in the the Warren Court kind of knew something about what makes a true and viable First Amendment country.
Dr. Flo, what do you think about this latest attempt by Governor DeSantis of Florida to punish the libs, to own the libs?
Yeah, I think he's on a crusade to show that he's a conservative hero and he's a woke killer, right? He's doing anything he can to show that, I'm the one that's going to do these very Trump-like things, right? Like he's been running for president for a while. He's been doing all of this stuff in order to prove himself in a particular way. And as you said, ultimately what he's doing is he's carpet bombing, right? I mean, he's dropping bombs everywhere. And when you do that, targets that you weren't intending are going to be hit. And so he's going to end up with all types of problems. I mean, if you're going after Disney isn't just a place that people from the left like to go to or watch movies from, right? I mean, Disney is Disney. Disney is for everyone. If you're going after the press, well, the press is not only liberal, it's also conservative. And you're going to end up causing problems for the conservative press, which is why Fox News and probably some other outlets are coming back at him. I think he's kind of underestimating how much, how many problems he's going to bring himself by just trying to seem like he's Trump with nicer hair, right? He's going to end up with a lot of cuter kids. Yeah, he's going to end up with a lot of problems, and I mean, so far, I think that's what we're seeing here.
So, you mentioned that not only there are not only liberals in the media, but I would say that there's a much more sprawling conservative media apparatus than there is liberal media, because there is no equivalent of Fox News on the left. They try to say MSNBC is the same thing. It's not the same thing. They still report, and they still report on things that are not good for Joe Biden when there are such things. They don't completely ignore stories when they're bad for Democrats, like Fox News likes to do. And so I think that you're right, Dr. Flo, that this is not a good look for him, and he really needs to check himself before he wrecks himself. But
he's attacking these points. He's attacking these. A lot of conservatives think the liberals control the media, and like you said, there's a much more sprawling conservative media apparatus than liberal. But this is just a point that he can aim at. And again, if you just carpet bomb, you're going to end up hitting things that you don't intend, and that's what he's doing. It's kind of ridiculous. Every other week, there's some really big thing that he's aiming for.
Yeah, it's almost like he's trying to find something new to put into legislation that will be red meat for ultra conservative.
Exactly.
Every chance it gets. And speaking of which, we just had the horrible mass shooting in Nashville last week, and now in Florida, Governor DeSantis has this bill that will make it legal for people to conceal firearms without a permit. And they seem to be going in the direction of less gun control and not more gun control, despite everything that's happened last weekend every day in this country. I don't even have the figure of the amount of mass shootings, but they happen just about every day in this country. And Florida is making it easier for people to have guns and not more difficult. What are your thoughts about this, Gustavo?
Yeah, Florida, the land of the Parkland massacre, the land of the Pulse massacre, the LGBT nightclub in Orlando. It's a disgrace to all these people massacred because it's so easy to get guns, not just in the United States, but especially so in Florida. And look, I actually support the right to bear arms. I also think, if I have a gun, if I want to apply for a gun, there better be every possible permit, test, everything. And also there should be guns that I should not be able to get. Like, I, as a citizen, I cannot drive a tank, even though I might want to drive a tank. So why is it that I could get a weapon just as deadly, if not deadlier than a tank, in an AR-14? And why do we need a governor who wants to be president that says, hey, I know what the solution is to solve gun violence in this country? More guns. It makes no sense. But again, going to Dr. Flo's point, it's just carpet bombing and setting liberal traps that thankfully so far are catching DeSantis and not any actual liberals.
Dr. Flo, your thoughts on the new legislation in Florida?
Yeah. Just to give a figure on that mass shooting question that you just brought up, there have been at least 132 by March 27th of this year. In 2000, Florida had more than 3,000 gun deaths, which was up from 2,800 in 2019. A whole lot of these deaths, and not just in Florida, but all over the country, a large portion of them are generally going to be suicide deaths. But in the state of Florida, the death rate was 13.7 per 100,000, also in 2019. In this year, we have 10,000 gun deaths already by March 27th of this year, which puts us on track for having nearly, if not more than 40,000 by the end of this year in the country. Right. I mean, so I don't think we need looser gun laws. I'm a little bit on the other side where I feel like the only way that we're ever going to deal with this very serious issue of gun violence. I mean, gun violence is what I write about and teach about. I spend a lot of time researching it. I think the only way that we're ever going to change it is if we will be willing to take a page from many other countries on the planet that don't have nearly as many guns and really do something to reduce and possibly get rid of the guns. And I know that sounds almost crazy to most people. How could we ever do that when we have so many guns floating around in this society? I just don't see how we're ever going to stop, 10,000 gun deaths. They're in the country of Japan. It doesn't even crack 1,000 if it's even that close to 1,000. And they have half of our population. I think we're out of control with guns. I think Ron DeSantis is just, off the rails to try and loosen gun laws in a state that already has so much of a problem with gun violence. And I think that we as a country really need to come to grips with this. I mean, 132 mass shootings by March is absolutely ridiculous.
It is ridiculous. And as you mentioned, Gustavo, there should be some guardrails. And I was talking to someone about this the other day. You have to go through a process to get a driver's license. A car can be a dangerous weapon, but it isn't always, but it can be. Guns are always dangerous weapons, yet you can be just about anyone. You can be under care for mental health issues. You can have any kind of thing going on. You don't have to have a permit. And I just think it's like, as you said, Dr. Flo, I do think we need less guns. And, we can, and also, as you said, Gustavo, I do support the right to bear arms, but it doesn't mean you can walk around with a grenade launcher or a flamethrower.
Or a cannon.
There have to be some kind of limits. I mean, when the founding fathers made this amendment, people walking around with muskets, and you had to reload. It took you 40 seconds to reload for one shot. You couldn't just shoot 30 bullets in a second in a crowded classroom full of first graders. It's crazy. And what's crazier is that Republicans don't care enough to do anything about it. And I just wish that we had some kind of solution or something we could do. And it's sad, but I feel like we're in a space now where I don't know what the next step would be, other than getting supermajorities in the Senate or getting rid of the filibuster and then getting control of the House again. And none of those things seem likely in the immediate interim. But when we come forward, gentlemen, we're going to take a little step away from politics and talk about something that I think most of us grew up watching and at least on some level being fans of, the WWE, formerly the WWF. It is merging with UFC in something that I did not see coming, and I think it's pretty crazy, but we're going to talk about this when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
Areva Martin in real time on KBLA Talk 1580.
Personal Law Office is your go-to attorney for criminal cases. That's why we support the right to a fair trial for Los Angeles Council Member Mark Ridley Thomas. Call me at 424-261-2075 if you're facing any criminal offenses.
One mic.
For KBLA Talk 1580, I'm Tavis Smiley with a KBLA editorial. I've said it all along. Presumption of innocence, fundamental fairness, due process. Convicted now on 7 counts in his federal bribery case, LA City Councilman Mark Ridley Thomas scarcely got 1, and his chances of getting the other 2 were slim to none, and Slim was out of town. Did you hear the jury forewoman's comments? The jurors were confused by the jury instructions, confused by the answers to the almost 12 questions they sent to the judge. She acknowledged that some jurors were not even paying attention. And she said the jury knew that the $100,000 contribution from MRT was legal, but the way the jury instructions were written made them feel like they had to find MRT guilty of wire fraud. Again, those are her words. So let me offer you just 3 questions that I want you to ponder. 1, why do you think the U.S. government spent millions of dollars of your money going after an alleged $100,000 bribe? 2, USC is in the news almost daily, it seems, for yet another violation of some law or the contestation of somebody else's humanity. But unlike all the other cases, they didn't get caught by some LA Times investigation. No, USC walked this particular case involving a powerful Black leader into the U.S. Attorney's Office. Who made that decision, and how and why was it made? 3, while all the focus is on the indictment of Donald Trump, are you paying attention to all the other high-profile Black elected officials that are being targeted across the nation by the Justice Department? Joe Biden's Justice Department. I'll let you marinate on that for a second. The judge in one case involving a high-profile Black elected threw the charges out and told the government to kick rocks. It doesn't matter who's in charge. The hunting season for Black folk is always open. I do not purport to know what's next for MRT. What I do know is that his legacy of love and service to our community is intact. What I do know is that God can turn your shipwreck into a submarine. As for all the rest of us, be vigilant, be sober, be circumspect. Just because you don't believe in conspiracy theories don't mean they ain't after you. For KBLA Talk 1580, I'm Tavis Smiley. We, of course, welcome your comments.
Welcome back to Areva Martin in real time. I'm Avi Bernard filling in for Areva Martin today, and we are joined by Dr. Douglas Flo, who is a professor at Washington University in St. Louis, and our good friend Gustavo Arellano, who is a columnist at the LA Times. And this story I saw today, I wanted to talk to you about. World Wrestling Entertainment, also known as WWE, is merging with Endeavor Group, which is the parent company of UFC, to form a new publicly traded company. The deal values the newly combined company at over $21 billion. Vince McMahon will retain his current WWE title of executive chairman at the new company, which does not yet have a name, but I believe might be called TKO. Although Vince McMahon was forced to retire as the WWE CEO last year following a hush money and sexual harassment scandal. And this is this marks the end of the WWE as a family-owned business. Vince McMahon bought the company from his father in the early 1980s. And I know that I myself grew up watching WWE. I remember Hulk Hogan was my first favorite wrestler. Then it was The Rock and Stone Cold. And even though I'm not a fan anymore, I do look back on those days fondly. And I got to give a shout out to one of our engineers, Andy, who is still a big wrestling fan. I'm sure he's keeping up with this story. But I just wanted to get your take on this, gentlemen, as I'm sure we all watched wrestling at some point. What do you think about this, Dr. Flo?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm from the era of Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, George the Animal Steel, Junkyard Dog, and
old school.
Old school. I remember and this was when it was WWF, was like a very a very big part of a section of my childhood. This is a really interesting combination, and obviously they're coming together more for money than for any other practical purposes. I mean, I'm just hoping that I don't end up seeing UFC fighters giving long dramatic speeches and jumping off the turnbuckle at any point. It's an interesting combination. I mean, it just remains to be seen whether or not this will, which direction will it take WWE in. I'm imagining it won't change the UFC too much, but maybe there's some ways in which the WWE will benefit from being connected to this very skilled and very real fighting league.
All right, Gustavo, you're up. Your thoughts?
Yeah, this shows what a ruthless, brilliant genius Vince McMahon is. This is a man who got kicked out of his own family's company for these allegations. He comes back, he engineers this deal, he secures a financial future of his family, a multi-billion-dollar sale, and they're still part of it. So McMahon, I know there was just a biography that just came out on him, and it's a really remarkable story. Like before our childhoods, before we were growing up. So I remember, the greatest sports moment in history, by the way, Mr. Perfect throwing himself a 100-yard touchdown pass. That was back in the day. But at a time, all these wrestling leagues were all regional. There was no big overarching thing. The McMahons, they were able to make it into a national thing, an international thing. There's been missteps. XFL, which I mentioned earlier, was a huge failure, and they're trying it again, this time through The Rock. We'll see what happens then. But with UFC, that's what I was most surprised at, that the going price for both of them, UFC was higher, which didn't surprise me. But WWE, it was still, the valuation was, I think it was $9 billion, which is humongous, absolutely humongous. This was, and this is also combining with Endeavor, which is run by Ari Emanuel. So this is big time Hollywood. So I think what you're going to see, this is all, what do they call it? Synergy. So UFC is going to be combining with WWE. They're going to be making television shows. They're going to be making movies. The last big star, of course, to come out of the WWE, John Cena, which I thought was great when he was wrestling back in the day, but I think he's a better actor than he is a wrestler. And then, of course, you'll see The Rock coming back. We got to get back Triple H against The Rock versus Shawn Michaels, D-Generation X. I mean, we already have the Latino World Order. Man, this is going to be awesome.
Well, you both make some great points, Gustavo, especially about the valuation of WWE being at $9 billion. That's worth more than, I believe, any professional sports franchise. I mean, I believe the Washington Commanders are being sold for around $6 billion. And you have a whole 50% higher valuation for WWE. And I just think it's remarkable that these two entities are combining when I think they're kind of polar opposites. You know, WWE is sports entertainment, and we all know that it's scripted. It's not, you know, the outcome is predetermined, and UFC couldn't be anything further than that. You never know what's going to happen with UFC. People get knocked out when they've been winning the whole fight, like who Kamaru Usman did in against Edwards, not this fight, but the previous time. And it's crazy to me that these two entities are combining, but we'll see what happens. And you mentioned the possibility of them having shows together. I don't know what that would look like, but old Vince McMahon, he always finds a way to keep himself in the game. And he used to be, you know, he was always a character when he would be on camera, and he's nothing less than that, you know, behind the scenes as well, even though he does have some issues apparently with some hush money payments, just like his boy Donald Trump. But we'll leave
WWE Hall of Famer Donald Trump, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Let's not forget that.
That's a good point. Gustavo Arellano of the LA Times and Dr. Douglas Flo, professor at Washington University. Oh, and Dr. Flo, tell us real quickly in 30 seconds about you have a documentary coming up with National Geographic. Tell us about that.
Yes, I'm working on a docuseries called Ancient China from Above Season 2 with National Geographic, which should be out sometime later this year. And then also I'm the author of a book called Uncontrollable Blackness about African-American men and criminality in New York City. That's from UNC Press. It was published in 2020.
That's right. That's one of my favorite titles of any book. It's called Uncontrollable Blackness.
Thank you.
and we'll have you back on, you know, several times before the docuseries comes out, but we'll definitely have you on closer to when it's released too, just to remind everybody. Thank you both so much.
Great. Thank you so much.
Gracias as always.
Thank you for having me.
We'll talk to you soon. And when we come forward, we're going to be talking to LA Times columnist Erica D. Smith about a really insightful article she wrote in the LA Times about the verdict of MRT, Mark Ridley Thomas, and what it means for Black Los Angeles. And then in the second half of the second hour, we're going to be talking about women's reproductive rights and the attack that they face in many red states. That's all coming up when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.